Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Today on the podcast, I'm talking to Marj Glazebrook. Marj is the talent acquisition team leader at Thales, where she leads the Sydney and Melbourne recruitment teams and leads the national graduate recruitment campaign. Marj has had 16 years experience in recruitment, so I've invited her onto the podcast to give us some insights into how recruitment's changed over the years and to also provide advice to students who are competing for graduate programs, as well as candidates who are looking for lateral entry, how they can stand out in what is going to be a really competitive recruitment market. Welcome to the podcast, Marj.
Hi.
Great to have you on. I have been hoping to get you on for some time. Do you want to sort of start off by giving us an idea of what the biggest changes that you've seen over the last 15 years?
I think back to when I first started in recruitment, I think the whole interview process, just in terms of that actual interview, whether it be face-to-face or over the phone, has really changed. I think, and you may remember this as well, from back in the day, you would have, a panel, and it could be a big panel of 3 or 4 people. And it was really that panel of people sort of hammering questions to a candidate. And it just seemed a lot more sort of one way. And as it just seemed like the employer was really sort of doing all of the questions, and it didn't seem as much a two-way sort of process from my perspective. I think the way interviews are now, particularly, it's very much two-way. It's very much about that whole candidate experience. As an employer, you're obviously trying to find out as much as you can about that particular candidate and what is the best role for them in your business. But really, as a candidate, there's so much that you want to know, and you've definitely got that floor to sort of ask all those questions and make sure you walk away from that interview with everything you know about that company and an informed choice that you can make. So I think that whole candidate experience has really changed from my perspective.
And that can only be a good thing. Look, I think, Marj, that it's probably changed in your environment, but there are definitely a lot of organisations that are still doing those panel one-way street type of interviews, unfortunately.
Yeah, and look, I think, even over the years when I've been a candidate, in the last few years before I've come back to where I am at the moment with Thales, if I was to go into an interview, I would go in armed with heaps of questions. But I think, if it was 15, 16 years ago, you would ask a few questions at the end and that was it. But I really encourage candidates to, ask as many questions as possible, and they've really got the ball's in their court, I think, to be honest. So I think it's really good if it's a two-way, and it doesn't have to be as formal as they always need to be. I think you can have a less formal type interview and still get as much as you need out of it as an employer in terms of finding out about the candidate.
And so, Marj, just to give our listeners a bit of context, can you explain a little bit about Thales and also what your role is responsible for?
Sure. So Thales, probably not as well known in Australia. So globally, we've got about 85,000 employees. In Australia, it's about 3,500 at the moment. Predominantly, we're a technology engineering company. So in Australia, I suppose, we do a lot of work for defence. So, for example, in Bendigo, we design and manufacture defence vehicles, predominantly for the Australian Defence Force, but also we sell them to customers overseas as well. We are involved in cybersecurity, in rail, transport, air traffic management. So really diverse, technical, really interesting fields of engineering that we're involved in, which is really great. And my role, so I'm the talent acquisition team leader. So I've got a team of recruiters in Melbourne and also in Sydney that work with me. We support a number of our business units in Australia. So we look after all of the recruitment, so whether it be sort of temporary recruitment or permanent recruitment. And I also head up our early careers, our graduate recruitment for Australia. So that keeps me very busy. And makes for a very interesting job. It's actually my second time back at Thales, so I'm one of those people that has left. I left quite a few years ago and then decided to come back, which was very exciting.
And that can only be a good thing from a reputation of your organisation, that you've actually left and come back, which is quite an unusual thing for people to do.
Yes, definitely. And I am, it's quite interesting. Since I've been back, I've become one of those people that will also look at, whether we've got other previous employees that want to come back, because I think it's a really great thing. I think it's a great thing when people do move on and they can learn other skills and develop elsewhere, and then potentially come back if they're interested again in the future, which is advantageous.
So like all businesses, I would expect that your recruitment processes have changed significantly since COVID occurred or COVID started. Can you give us some insights into how things have changed for your recruitment team?
Yeah, so I know it's been sort of quite different for a lot of different businesses here in Australia. So our recruitment has continued, which is great. So pretty much as soon as COVID-19 hit, our business moved to working from home. So all of our interviews, which were either face-to-face or perhaps over the phone, all of those moved very quickly to video interviews. So using Zoom, we very quickly came up to speed with how to use Zoom video technology, which was exciting. So yeah, all of our recruitment still continued, but I suppose for us it was coming up to speed with how to use Zoom, but also how to educate our business and our managers. Because I think you do get managers, and naturally you sort of want to meet that person and almost you want to have them in that room, so to decide, once you've met them, is this the right candidate? So it was really trying to work with our managers in terms of really, whether it's on Zoom or you've got them in the room with you, we're going through the same questions, we're going to get the same answers. So just making sure that they were comfortable with how to use the technology, and then just proceed as normal, to be honest.
Marj, a lot of candidates, they're not used to using video, and particularly, having an interview talking into a screen. Do you make some allowance for that, or do you feel that candidates need to really get their head around technology and practice preparing for video interviews?
Yeah, look, we try to, we do, when we do book candidates in for that step of the process, we will explain, the type of technology that we're using. It is pretty easy and we're happy to support people through it. But look, if, I have had a candidate in the last few months that just wasn't comfortable with it at all. And, I worked with that candidate around that. In the end, we made a decision to do it over the phone. I suppose for us, we just want to make sure that the candidate's in the best position so that they are comfortable. There's nothing worse than someone being really anxious or really nervous, and that can affect their interview. So we did it over the phone, and we were able to accommodate that. We ended up hiring that person. They were very happy with the process. We still got the same information out of them. I think, video interviewing is advantageous because you can see the person, you can see how they interact and connect with them. That eye contact is quite exciting and quite important, but not everybody is going to be comfortable with that. And I think the other thing we are mindful of is, depending on perhaps where the person's based, or sort of what where they're based in Australia, what internet technology, what internet sort of quality internet they have there, or perhaps even if they have a device to do video interviewing. So that's something that we're careful that we check, because we can't just assume that everybody has the capability or technology to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And, I do still feel that candidates, with this, if you are job searching at the moment, it's up to you in some ways to practice, get familiar with the technology. You can easily Google, about lighting and the right setup, because there's nothing worse than talking to someone when, you can see straight up their nostrils, or you can only see the top of their head. So, I do encourage people, the clients that we work with, to do a bit of research and, play around with the setup. So it's a good experience for both parties.
Yeah, and look, something I tend to do as well is I will dial into an interview a little bit earlier. So say if the interview's at 12 noon, I might organise to dial in there, 5 minutes earlier with the candidate, just so we can check that everything's okay. Can we see them? And this is before the manager's dialed in. So I think I can check, okay, we can hear you. Oh, no, you've got it on mute. Let's sort that out. So at least we can get that sort of all, I think as COVID has progressed, a lot more people have had more experience using Zoom, but I think for the foreseeable future, this could be the way we interview. And, if this means that we can see candidates a bit quicker and we don't have to wait for a time for them to take time off work to come in for an interview, maybe this is something that we can keep doing in the future and keep having positive results.
So from your point of view, Marj, do you feel, this remote way of working in recruitment, does it make the process slower for candidates, or do you think it actually speeds it up?
I think it's made it quicker. I think it has made it quicker. Look, the advantage has also been that most candidates and most of our managers are all working from home at the moment. So I suppose, in the normal world pre-COVID-19, one of our challenges was always trying to get managers and their availability, or on the flip side, also trying to organise a time for a candidate to come in and, they would either, perhaps have a dental appointment they needed to duck out from work to attend this, or they would take some time off or whatever that might be. But some of those logistics were challenging. But I think the video interviewing, it's quite easy for someone to find a quiet spot or do it just before work or do it at the end of the day. We had a discussion recently as a team, and we felt that our recruitment process has definitely become a bit quicker. I think the technology has definitely helped with that, which has been really good.
And that's really interesting, because there is a lot of, blog posts out there telling candidates that they need to be more patient during COVID, where, from your experience, it sounds like in some ways it's actually reducing the length of time that the recruitment process takes.
Yeah, and look, I think every business will be slightly different. So we will get our approvals for our positions before we actually start the recruitment process. So then I find there are some other businesses out there that before they actually then, make an offer to a candidate, there will be a process at the end where they go back and check that they've got all the right approvals, or, sign and cross all the T's and dot all the I's just before they make the offer. So that can make it a bit longer. Something I do try to focus on now more than ever, because of the current sort of climate, I suppose, is the quicker the process can be, the better, and the quicker you can update candidates whether they are successful or not, and not keep people waiting too long. I think the other thing that we're very conscious of at the moment is there are a lot of people that aren't working. So people will be very active in looking for jobs. So the quicker you can let them know through the process whether they're successful or not, that's obviously better for them, so that they can either move on and look for something else, or they go, okay, great, Marj at Thales has just offered me this job. This is really exciting. So you don't want to drag it out too long. It comes back to that candidate experience as well.
Yes, very important. Now, Marj, I'm keen to get your insights on both graduate recruitment and lateral recruitment, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically any recruitment that's not graduate. Can you tell us a little bit about the graduate program at Thales specifically, and what the process would involve for a candidate going through that process?
Yeah, so at the moment, so we recruit anywhere from 30 to 40 graduates around the country. So we've got a number of different sites. So some sites will just recruit 1 or 2 graduates. Some may recruit quite a few more. We did a couple of years ago recruit 60 graduates in 1 year, which is very exciting. So it just depends on the needs of our business. Our graduate program is for 2 years. The really exciting thing that I do tell people when I'm talking to students at universities is that all of our graduates are actually offered permanent positions, which is really exciting. So they come on board, do the 2 years as a grad, learn different parts of the business, go through a lot of mentoring, a lot of training, and then they move into, they still have continued work after that, moving into other roles after the grad program finishes, which is really exciting. Some graduate programs out there will just be for that actual period of the grad development, but we offer permanent roles, which I think is really exciting in terms of a career for candidates.
And do the graduates over that 2 years, do they rotate around different areas of the organisation?
Some do, some don't. So we don't specifically sort of say that we offer structured rotations, and I know a lot of other businesses do, and some candidates will specifically look for that, which I completely understand. Because of the nature of our projects, and we do a lot of work in defence, we can't necessarily offer, 6 months here in your first year, then another 6 months in a different area. It just takes so long. Well, not so long. It takes time to sort of get up to speed on a particular part of the business, on a particular project. If you sort of got to 6 months, you may not have made as big an impact as you would like. So generally, a lot of our graduates, when they come in, they may be on the same program for 12 months or 18 months. We do have some that may move around, but what we can do is, we do have some flexibility. So we've had some graduates in the past that have come into a particular graduate role. Then they've come and spoken to us within, 6 or 9 months and said, I'm not sure I'm loving this. And then we found them something else and we said, all right, what do you think you want to do? And then we'll go see what else we can find. And then they've moved into other roles, which they've really loved. I do think rotations are great. And I know a lot of other companies do offer them in terms of they will give students or candidates that sort of variety. And I think you can sort of walk out of a graduate program perhaps knowing where your strengths and weaknesses may lie a bit more, but also where your passions perhaps lie a bit more. So while we don't offer the really structured rotations through our grad program, we've got the flexibility to help our grads, sort of move into certain areas depending on what they want to do, which is good.
And Marj, can you explain, what are the benefits for a younger person to, or a student to get accepted on a specific graduate program, as opposed to just securing an entry-level role in a company?
Yeah, I think in a grad program, you do have the opportunity to get quite structured mentoring and coaching, and often there's really structured learning, particularly in the first year, to help grads transition from university to generally their first sort of career job. So it is a big change going from that uni life to working, whether it be in an office or perhaps at a manufacturing facility or wherever that grad role may be. But I think all the different grad programs I've seen, there's a lot of support to help that transition. You may have a buddy, you may have a mentor. I know with our graduates across the country will come together multiple times throughout the year. So building that network is really good, and I think can kick off, sort of those really strong networks for their career. Going back to what we talked about before, Leah, those rotations, I think that can appear in a grad program, depending on the company, can really give sort of more varied experience in those first couple of years and can really help a grad work out where they do want to go or where they don't want to go, and can give you different, tastes of different areas, which I think will only help someone decide, sort of what they will do or do not want to do in the future. So I think, that's not to say that an entry-level role is not a good thing to do, but yeah, I definitely think a graduate program is something that is exciting and will really set up your career quite well from the start, especially from that learning and development perspective.
And I mean, graduate programs have been hugely competitive for a long time. Can you give us an idea of the sort of volume of applicants that you're receiving every year compared to the number of roles actually offered at the end?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. It can vary, but and look, we're probably at the smaller side compared to some other companies that I know in terms of their grad programs. But look, if we've got sort of 40 to 50 roles, we had about 40 to 50 last year that we recruited, and we had about 3,000 applications. I know there's some other grad programs that will have 10, 12,000 applications come in, so it can be quite high. But on that, I know that hearing that 3,000 applications for 40 or 50 roles can perhaps seem quite daunting to students, and you sort of think, oh, how am I going to get my foot in the door? My recommendation is that I really recommend, when looking at grad roles, you should apply for as many roles as you can, keeping in mind the relevancy of it, like obviously relevant roles, not just for any role out there, and for companies that you're actually genuinely interested in. So as much as you might really want to work at company X, you don't want to just leave all your eggs in one basket. It's good to explore, go to university career events and those sorts of things and get to know more companies and apply for as many as you can that are relevant, just to keep more options open, if that makes sense.
So obviously, to get from 3,000 applicants down to 40 or 50 offers, there are a number of steps in the process and a number of criteria that your candidates would have to meet in order to get through those steps. Can you talk us a little bit through the steps in your particular program at Thales?
Yep. So our grad process is pretty simple and not using as much technology as some other companies. So everyone applies online, and the candidate will upload their resume and their academic transcript. We actually review every single application. So there's no technology that we use. I know there's a lot of other companies that will go through and they'll use lots of technology, looking at keywords and applications and those sorts of things. Our team, usually myself and another recruiter, will actually go through those applications and review them. We will then look at, obviously what we're looking for the role in terms of what type of degree, have they attached their transcript and any other bits and bobs. We will then reduce that to a shortlist for a manager, so that they can review those and give us their thoughts. And then after that, we will do a brief phone interview so we can talk to the candidate, get an understanding of why they've applied and where they want their career to go and why they want to work at Thales and those sorts of things. And then we invite them in either for an interview or for an assessment centre. So an assessment centre we would usually do where we need to recruit a number of roles for a business area. So we could bring in, say, 25 candidates for an assessment centre where we need to perhaps hire, maybe 6 or 8. But then perhaps if we've just got one specific role for a business, we'll just do normal interviews without the assessment centre. So it could be an interview or an assessment centre. And then after that, once we've sort of got our candidates that we've identified, we do reference checks. We do a police check for all of our candidates as well. And potentially, depending on where the candidate will work, if they're working at for example, one of our manufacturing production facilities, they will often do a medical check as well. But that's our process. You will find some companies will also add in some online testing. So that may also include, some verbal, numerical, abstract type testing. And that's something that we're looking at implementing in the future, and perhaps even some psychometric sort of profiling, just so we can see people's how they like to work and those sorts of things. So that's our process.
So, Marj, often, good academics, I assume, there needs to be a certain level of academic achievement in order to get through that process. But what are some of the other key attributes that you're looking for in terms of more soft skills that would sit around the academics?
Yeah, so that's quite interesting because so we do generally look for a minimum credit average. I would say years ago when I first started in graduate recruitment, you were always looking for people that had high distinctions across the board. But I think things have changed. I suppose, what we look for now is, yes, we want to see some good marks, so that minimum sort of credit average. I suppose we're also it's important for us to find candidates with a balance in their life. So we're looking for some good marks on their transcript, but also that they've perhaps been involved in some university activities, or they've worked part-time or casual whilst they've been at uni. And this will show that they can multitask, they can balance work and study. I also love to see when candidates, they were doing something on the side, which is related, related to their university, but it's their passion. So for example, they might be studying software engineering, but they're also doing some coding on the side, or they're doing some freelance web design or something like that. So it's sort of all connected. Or I know I've hired some students in the past that while they were studying at uni in their final year, they were also working as a tutor, and they were tutoring first year students in the same area that they were obviously going to complete their degree in. So that was really quite interesting. So I think what we look for is sort of the teamwork, the leadership potential, how people sort of can communicate, how they can engage with people, that ability to multitask. And I think one of the other things we've talked about as a business is the ability to deal with ambiguity. So, you don't always get every little piece of information that you need to complete some work. So I suppose we're looking for people that are pretty proactive, and if they don't have anything, if they don't have all the information that they need, have a bit of nous to sort of think about, okay, what am I going to do? Who do you think I can go and talk to? So that sort of ability to sort of not just sit there and go, well, I'll just wait until that information comes to me. Someone that can get up and go and have a chat to some people, perhaps that they've never even spoken to before, but to ask the questions and to get cracking on whatever they need to do.
That's really helpful, Marj. Just in terms of lateral recruitment, I just want to move on and get some, insights into how lateral recruitment has changed, particularly since COVID. Have you seen a big change in the numbers of applicants applying for roles in the last couple of months?
I think initially when COVID-19 sort of hit, definitely saw a drop in terms of applications. And definitely, I suppose, a little bit of hesitation around changing jobs. I definitely spoke to some candidates and even friends of mine that were looking for work, and a lot of friends of mine that were looking for work at the time sort of pulled back and decided I'm going to stay put and see where things go, because there was, quite a bit of uncertainty. But in saying that, I have to say, I would say in the last sort of 4 weeks, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, definitely seen an improvement in terms of those numbers. And, still when we've been offering roles this whole time, sort of since the end of March, we've been hiring continually. We've been offering roles. We've had candidates resign from, their employer at the time and come over and work with us. So yeah, definitely Leah saw those numbers drop at the start. But I think, if anything more recently, I think with a bit more positivity locally and things are starting to improve out there, I think we've definitely seen those numbers improve, which is really good.
Oh, that is very good news for our listeners. I expect that it will be a more competitive market going forward because there will be less jobs and perhaps more applicants in the market. What would be your key pieces of advice for people who are job seeking at the moment?
I think definitely one of the key things I would recommend is always to tap into your networks as much as possible. I know that doesn't make a lot of people may not be comfortable with that, but I think whether it's your friends, your family, previous bosses that you've worked with, previous colleagues, you never know. The more people that know that you're looking for work, you never know what can happen. Someone might hear tomorrow, oh, we're looking for, a finance manager, or we're looking for this or that, and then they will come back to you. So I think tapping into those networks and letting people know is really good. And it's just something that, Australia is the culture that we have here, and the ability, and people want to help each other, and particularly at the moment, I think there's a big focus on that more than ever. So I really think tapping into your networks and reaching out to previous people that you've worked with, even if you haven't spoken to them for a while, you just never know what can come of that. I think the general thing, like that, you've got all your standard job boards out there, you Seek and adverts on LinkedIn and multiple other job boards out there. I think there's always a place for those. I think as well, it's a good opportunity to think a bit more broadly. And maybe it is an opportunity to look at something a little bit different, or a position that's a little bit outside the square, or something that you thought of back in the day, but you weren't too sure about it, and maybe it is the time to have a look at something a little left of field. So don't just necessarily look at where the types of roles you always look at, but maybe just see what else is out there, and you might find something else where your skills are quite transferable. So I think that's always good. The other thing I would definitely recommend as well, and I don't think people do this as much, and that could be also down to the particular recruiter. If you do go through an interview process, if you do apply for particular roles and you get a knockback, so perhaps you don't get past the phone interview, or you don't get past the interview, or you get down to the final two and someone else is selected, definitely ask for some feedback. I know some people, when they get the call and they've been told they're unsuccessful, it's pretty uncomfortable to hear that, and you just want to get off the phone as quickly as possible. I'm the type of recruiter that will proactively give some feedback to candidates, in terms of perhaps how they can prepare a bit better for the interview, or if there was anything that sort of stood out that perhaps they could work on. But I really think if you've gotten to a certain stage of the process where you've interacted a bit more with that business, whether it be over the phone or over Zoom or whatever format, really ask for some feedback if you can. Sometimes there was just a candidate that was stronger in, as a piece of technology, whatever it may be, but it's just good to know. So I definitely recommend finding out, any sort of feedback that you can. So those would be my tips, I suppose, at the moment, Leah.
And just going back to what you're saying about the feedback, do you think recruiters prefer candidates to follow up for feedback over the phone or over email?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Look, I'd be happy either way. I find sometimes when you do call someone and you say, look, unfortunately, you've been unsuccessful. Like I said, I think a lot of people just want to get off that phone. It's not the best feeling, especially if you're really excited about that job. So, but I will always say, look, would you like some feedback now, and give them that opportunity. I do find you do get some candidates that will send an email perhaps later that night. They've had a bit of time to think, and they'll send an email saying, hey, have you got any other feedback? So if they send it via email, I'm always happy to email back and say, look, here's some feedback. If you want to talk further in detail, just give me a call. So I'm pretty happy either way, really dependent on how comfortable that candidate is in terms of how they want that feedback.
Well, that's good to hear, because I do hear from clients that recruiters seem often very reluctant to give feedback. Do you know the reasons why that might be?
Yeah, look, it's quite interesting, because I think when I first started, there's always been that you've got to be very careful, and obviously, when you're doing an interview with a candidate, it's really looking at their experience, how it relates to the role, what can they do, those sorts of things. So you cannot discriminate based on whether what gender they are, or how old they are, or what school they went to, or whatever that may be. But I think, look, I know over the years, talking to lots of different recruiters, I think a lot of recruiters may have a bit of a less is more approach, and they'd rather say less just in case they say a bit more and perhaps it's taken the wrong way. And I know there are a lot of recruiters that would prefer to give the feedback over the phone rather than in writing, because as we know, sometimes in writing, the meaning can be taken a different way. So, look, I just think for me, a candidate has taken the time to either come in and see us, do a Zoom interview, which may be an hour, spend some time over the phone doing an initial chat. There's a lot, they've spent time also doing their application. So for me, I just want to give them some honest feedback. And, they may have struggled through certain questions, or, sometimes you can really tell in an interview where they're so nervous that they haven't been able to listen to the question properly, and they've gone down a rabbit hole with their questions. So I try to give them as much feedback as I can to help them, because otherwise it may be something that they repeat again. So if the recruiter is doing the right process, and if the recruiter has also, the other thing I find, you might find that a recruiter doesn't have any feedback because they haven't actually, they may or may not have been involved in the interview, and maybe they haven't been able to get that feedback from the manager, which probably isn't great, to be honest. So, I will always come back and go, right, whether I was in the interview or not, here's some feedback that I've had. Here's something to help you for next time. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, it definitely does. What other advice, from an internal talent acquisition perspective, what other advice would you give candidates in order to help them stand out from the competition in a good way?
Yeah, I think be on time. So whether it is on Zoom or, if it is a face-to-face interview, if we resume to those in the future, being on time is a really good thing. Smile. So even on Zoom, face-to-face, even if you're on a phone interview, you can really tell when someone is smiling, and you can hear it. Ask if you're not sure, and particularly if you are doing a video interview, if sometimes there might be a couple of people on there, and we all know what it's like. I've done Zoom meetings, with my family over Easter, and everybody's trying to jump in with, information. And if you've missed the question, if someone's spoken over someone, or if you can hear a lawnmower in the back somewhere, if you're not sure, just ask. Because if you just assume, you might completely go down the wrong path. The other thing, just be really prepared. Do some research on the company, and not just on their website, but I always recommend to people, Google the company. So if you're going for an interview with Thales today, Google them, because you'll see some, there might be an article that's popped up in the media in the last week, about what's been happening and a big contract that we won or something. So it's always really useful to do some research. The other thing, and I was thinking about this actually this morning, Leah, if you're coming in, or if you're doing it in an assessment centre, so whether it's a face-to-face one for a graduate role, or perhaps it's a virtual one, because a lot of companies are doing virtual assessment centres now, don't, treat the other students that are in the assessment centre like colleagues, like future workmates, not as competition. Yes, you're all trying to get a job, but there could be multiple jobs. But also what we want to see is how you engage with those people, because they could be your future workmates. So as much as people think assessment centres, you've got to give daggers to everybody, these could be your future colleagues. There might be multiple roles. We often will get briefed and say, okay, we've got 6 roles to recruit from this assessment centre today. But I will have managers that say, hey, if you've got any others that stand out, we can take 8. We can get another couple of roles approved. So that's a really hot tip. The other thing as well, whether it's for graduates or even just lateral recruitment, so if you know someone that already works at that company, before the interview, reach out and try and get some information about what it's like to be there. Researching and reaching out to someone who works there will give you another perspective, I suppose. And my ultimate thing is just to be you. Gotten to an interview stage for a reason, whether it's Thales, where I'm working, or another place. They've liked you for a reason. They like some of your experience. They like what you've put in your application. That you've gotten to that point for a reason. So just be you, and that's all you can be. I always say to people, I have a lot of graduates that say, oh, do I need to wear a suit? I'm like, only wear a suit if you want to. We don't wear suits day to day at work, but if you want to, you can. But also there's nothing harder than to watch someone in an assessment centre all day and they've got this tie on and they never wear ties and they're so uncomfortable and they're wriggling around. So that can then affect their day. So I think for me, it's about, you've just got to be honest to yourself. And that sounds very cheesy, but you've got to be you, because you want a company to make the decision based on, naturally who you are.
No, there are some absolute nuggets in that, Marj, so thank you. And I couldn't finish, I know you have a terrific sense of humour, so I couldn't finish this interview without asking you if you have any funny stories over your time in recruitment about candidates who've maybe stood out for the wrong reasons.
Yes, always. I feel like you can always talk about some of the funny ones. We had a candidate who we flew from interstate once, flew the candidate in the night before, and then he had an assessment centre with us the next day. When I went to meet him to take him through to the assessment centre, I'm like, oh, how was your flight yesterday? Blah, blah, blah. We're chit-chatting. And I said, oh, what did you get up to last night? And he goes, oh, Marj, I went out with some mates and I was out till 3 a.m. this morning. The assessment centre was at 8:30. So he'd landed from where he was interstate, gone out with some mates, gone out heavily drinking, and still made it to the assessment centre. But let me tell you, there was some pretty heavy eyes that were falling asleep by about 11 a.m. in the assessment centre. So that was quite interesting that he was telling me that he was out all night. And the other one I was actually thinking of was had a video interview with a candidate, and this is not recently, this was I think last year, but this particular candidate partway through the interview, and this is not a lie, this is no exaggeration, Leah, all of a sudden leant over and grabbed a kebab, had a kebab wherever they were sitting on their desk or whatever, and then just started eating the kebab, like while myself and the manager were asking some questions. So, look, I didn't really know how to respond to that because I haven't really had anyone pull a kebab out in their interview. But, yeah, that was pretty interesting, I have to say.
That is quite amazing, isn't it? Like, of all things that you would eat in an interview.
And it was 10 a.m. I mean, look, I am a fan of a kebab, Leah, but 10 a.m. But also pulling it out in an interview is quite interesting. So yeah, that was that one.
Okay, so anyone out there, no kebabs and no heavy nights out on the town the night before the assessment centre.
Correct.
Look, Marj, it's been terrific to have you on the program. I recently did an interview with a recruiter from an agency side of things. So it's been really great to get a perspective from someone who works in internal talent acquisition. And I think you've provided some great pearls of wisdom in our chat today. So look, thanks for your time. I know that you're very busy at the moment. So I just want to thank you for being generous with your time, and I wish you and your team all the best for the remainder of the year.
Thank you so much, Leah. Thank you. And hopefully I have been able to help some people out there.
You certainly have. Thanks, Marj.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.